We're back with two candidates who would like to be your next representative in District 13 in the State House of Representatives here in Tennessee. Susan Richardson Williams.
Well, I've gotten some mailings that have come to my house, even though I'm not in your district. I'm on somebody's mailing list. And one of the charges, I would say, against your being reelected, Gloria, is that you are not effective. That you've sponsored 20 bills, you've passed 2, the Community Schools Act being one of those 2. Are you effective? Can you be effective when you're one of 28 Democrats in a House full of 99?
Just eliminate them all, Susan?
Well,
seriously?
No, but I mean, it's a legitimate charge.
Well,
I think
it is a legitimate charge, and I can't wait to answer that, because actually I think I have been effective. I've certainly been effective in bringing issues to light that folks like the Ag-Gag bill and things like that. When it comes to being a Democrat in a super majority of Republicans, it is tough to get a bill passed. When they tell you giving Gloria Johnson a second in committee is political suicide, it's tough to get a second in committee.
That's my point.
But I feel I can beat that.
And I think you've shown that a little bit. And I know that obviously I'm here as the Democrat, but I mean, I think what you've said, and can you give some other examples of bills, well, maybe you didn't sponsor, but that you altered?
I think too, and I don't want to sound like I'm cheerleading you, but I think this applies to any state rep or state senator, is that you don't necessarily, it doesn't always have to be about bills. I mean, I know we've called our state rep to say, hey, can you get this done, or can you look at that, as just not
constituent services.
Yeah, it's constituent services as opposed to just getting a bill passed.
I would like to hear, if you can answer my question, what have you been able to alter that the supermajority has?
Absolutely,
I think that's an important thing.
I worked a lot with some folks, and both of us across the aisle, on education issues, and a lot of those education issues that passed. It's funny. It's sort of funny, but it's also disheartening when somebody says, I wish they would let you come talk to our caucus about those education issues, you know. And so there were people that I worked with pretty closely on the other side of the aisle to adapt and craft some of those things.
Let's talk about one issue that's going to come up this session, and that is Common Core. The governor, who's been a champion of that, at times has now said, I'd like to see a full vetting, I think is the term that he's used. Eddie Smith, what do you think about Common Core standards as they are, and would you, in the role of the new state representative from District 13, support some changes in Common Core standards?
I would support some changes. You know, as we've looked at Common Core, a lot of people have looked at those as a ceiling for our students, and I think we need to turn those and look at them as a floor and let each community, because what Knoxville needs is different from every other community across the state, and let our local school boards build off of those standards to fit what's best for that community, so we don't end up with this one-size-fits-all mentality across not only the state but the nation, but allow our local communities to say, okay, this is what's going to be best for our community, and we want to go off these standards and go higher, but we're going to go in this direction, and maybe another community goes in another direction, because all of us working together helps to provide a better education so we can continue to attract those better paying jobs into the district.
Gloria Johnson, your perspective on Common Core.
I'm happy to hear that the governor is saying what some of us have been saying for a couple of years now about Common Core. Let's step back, let's look at it. The rollout was not great. You know, we sold it to the Chamber of Commerce, but we didn't talk to teachers and parents about it. And the fact is, you can't change much of Common Core. There's only a certain, you can't take things away from it. You can add a certain small percentage to it, but it is what it is with a few adaptations. I don't know if a few are enough, quite frankly. But people have made this into an argument of, do you support higher standards and teaching critical thinking and teaching problem solving, which every teacher supports. But how do we do that with standards that are relevant to kids and make sense to teaching?
And we've talked about it on this program before, but a lot of it is the implementation of how you reach those standards. Do both of you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Mike, you had some questions about jobs.
Actually, I wanted to, I had something else I was thinking.
Fire away.
Thanks for putting words in my mouth there.
My apologies.
No, Amendment 1 is what I want to talk about, because, you know, if it passes, it's going to be on the General Assembly to make some new rules, I assume. If you want to
This
tell
is
what-
the abortion amendment that is coming forward, and supporters of that amendment say we need it. In this state, we need to make some changes. Opponents say it's going to open the door to giving the legislature more power to really restrict abortion.
So how are each of you going to vote on this? And, you know,
Personally, and what's your position?
Okay,
Sure.
I'm going to vote no on one. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we don't need a constitutional amendment for the problems that I'm hearing from the yes on one people, and that is, you know, clinics aren't regulated. Clinics are regulated. That is a fact. There's many pages in the statute to do that. And in order, if we want to make clinics safer of any kind, we do not need a constitutional amendment. Really, the only thing this constitutional amendment does is take privacy rights away from women. We do not need a constitutional amendment in order to do legislation.
It allows the legislature at a later date to do that. Wouldn't you agree
Right.
that's what the amendment says?
Right. And being on the health committee, my first year in 2012, several legislators came in with a bill that, you know, was going to, they said they would bring it back after this amendment.
Okay.
They had the intention to do that.
Let's get your perspective.
I am voting yes on Amendment 1, and for some of the, you know, when the Supreme Court threw out in 2000 a lot of the restrictions that we had on abortions, the way that one of the dissenters gave us was that we would need to amend it through a constitutional amendment in order to put those restrictions back in. The restrictions such as making sure abortion clinics are firmly inspected. You know, they're not required to be inspected. They can submit themselves to inspection.
Eddie, that's not true.
That's not true.
That has been rhetoric that has been put out by the anti or pro Amendment 1 folks. Every medical clinic, irrespective of its duties, in the state of Tennessee is in fact licensed and inspected.
There's
so
46 pages in the
other
Tennessee Code.
reason?
But they are not
you have?
required to be. That's the biggest difference. You know, and then the second part of that is, you know, that we also need to make sure, you know, everybody has said
Eddie,
that
they
we
are
can
required to be. I don't
that
mean
we
to cut you
can
off.
that we are going to ban abortion. Well, the Supreme Court has said that abortion is the law of the land, and I think when you look across the country, what we've got is we've got the ability with this amendment to say, you know what, we're going to put certain restrictions up to this point, but the courts have said you can go this far and you can go no farther, and making sure that we pass sensible and common sense legislation so that we don't waste taxpayer money with frivolous lawsuits is what the legislature is going to have in its possession.
What legislation would you support if the amendment does pass?
Putting back in a 24-hour minimum waiting period, parental consent, and then, you know, making sure that our abortion clinics are absolutely 100% held to the same standard as outpatient facilities. That's as far as I believe that we can go from what I understand, and I don't believe that, you know, trying to pass we're going to ban abortion is not the way we need to go, because it's just going to get tied up in the courts and we will ultimately lose that.
Do you believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother?
You know, that is a very personal decision that I leave to each
Then
individual
why should it be put
person.
in a constitutional amendment? Because that language is on the ballot.
Okay, again, it goes back to the Supreme Court ruling in 2000 in which the judge who dissented in that case gave of how we needed to amend the Constitution in order to put these certain restrictions back in, such as the 24-hour minimum
You don't
waiting
have to
period.
keep it in. You can put that part out. Would you support that?
If you can do it without a constitutional amendment, but the judges have said everything has been struck down through the courts. So again, it's one of those things that the
I'm
way
pretty
that the
familiar
Supreme
with that
Court
litigation.
justice gave
We've
us...
got to take a quick break.
Okay.
We can jump back into this topic and others right after this.